Alright, peace to the 12. Alright, this video is titled, as you see, The Real Cowboys. Alright, so today we're going to talk about the hidden history of the Cowboys, alright? Specifically the so-called black man and how it pertains to him, alright? So let's get to it. Now, when you think of a cowboy, you think of this. You think of the Caucasian. You think of the country music. You think of all that type of all manner of that stuff, man. But and just look at this on Google. Look at the image. The one cowboy that's a so-called black man is a homosexual. All right, look at that. In pink. But anyway, of course you have Django right there, so I'll give him credit for that. So anyway, moving on. We're going to talk about how the Cowboys, the history of the black Cowboys has been, really putting under wraps. All right, but first we're going to get a scripture because, as you know, I always go back to the scriptures. All right, so Ezekiel. All right, I'll read the whole thing. All right, but 20 is what we're looking for. All right, let's get it. Ezekiel chapter 7. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Also thou, son of man, thus saith the Lord God unto the land of Israel, an end. The end is come upon the four corners of the land. Now is the end come upon thee, and I will send mine anger upon thee, and will judge thee according to thy ways, and will recompense unto thee all thine abomination. All right, so, stopping at there. This is at the time when Israel is about to be taken out of rulership, taken out of power, because of all the horrible things they were doing, all the evil, wicked ways that they were doing, in the nation, in the land of Israel. All right, so reading on. And mine eye shall not spare thee, neither will I have pity, but I will recompense thy ways upon thee, and thine abomination shall be in the midst of thee, and ye shall know that I am the Lord. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, and evil and only evil, behold, is come. And in this come, the end is come. It watcheth for thee. Behold, it is come. Once again, this is talking about the end of the reign of the nation of Israel. All right. The morning is come unto thee. O thou that dwellest in the land, the time is come. The day of trouble is near, and not the sounding again of the mountains. Now will I shortly pour out my fury upon thee, and accomplish mine anger upon thee, and will judge thee according to thy ways, and I will recompense thee for all thine abominations. All right, so once again, we were taken out of power, due to the wickedness that we had chosen to the wicked path that they chosen to walk. All right, now this is what I wanted. All right, this goes back to what I said. Why is this history hidden? Why is it barely mentioned? All right, verse 20, Ezekiel 7:20. As for the beauty of his ornament, he set in majesty, but they made the images of their abominations and of their detestable things therein. Therefore have I set it far from them, and will give it into the hands of the strangers for a prey, and to the wicked of the earth for a spoil, and they shall pollute it. All right. My face will I turn also from them, and they shall pollute my secret place, for the robber shall enter into it and defile it. All right. So that's what I really wanted, man. The beauty of his ornament, his majesty. All right, we're gonna go into what this word majesty means. All right, but he said he's going to give all of our things that made us important, because majesty means important, and he's going to give it to the heathen, all right, for a prey. What does that mean? They're going to steal your heritage, all right? They're going to possess your heritage, all right? And they shall pollute it, all right? They're going to make themselves, the originator and the engineer. All right, so anyway, let's read on. This is what I meant by majesty. You see that? So the majesty was taken from the nation of Israel. All right. Look at this. This is majesty. This is the etymology of the word. It means greatness, dignity, elevation, honor, excellence. great, large, big, abundant, great, considerable, strong, powerful, persons, elder, aged, great, mighty, grand, important. All right, so all of these things were taken away from us, man. All right, and that's why, growing up, the most of us growing up, what are we taught? We're taught that we come from slaves. They basically teach you that your history starts with slavery. All right, and then blah blah blah. The good so-called white man came and he set you free, and blah 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 blah. No, it's all bullshit. All right, the so-called black man was in rulership for thousands of years, man. All right, and I'm gonna prove that in this video. And then after I prove that, we're gonna go into the Cowboys. All right, but first thing I'm gonna prove, because someone listening to this video might say, well, Rob, this is talking about Israel, because some of you brothers, you probably don't believe that you're an Israelite. All right, so I'm gonna prove that you're an Israelite as well. All right, so let's get that. All right, so we're gonna first go with the Egyptians. All right, this is Genesis 42. All right, this is Joseph. All right, let's get it. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. All right, verse 6 of Genesis 42. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them. All right. And Joseph, verse 8, and Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. All right, so for those of you who don't know, pick you up to speed. Joseph was a brother. Joseph's one of the tribes of Israel, right? He's one of the brothers anyway. Anyway, they ended up selling him into slavery, and Joseph was a slave, but he ended up working his way to be the second in command of Egypt. All right, that's the point. And at a certain amount of time, or after a certain dispensation of time, a famine was throughout the land, and Joseph's brothers, the same people that had sold him into slavery, had to go into Egypt and basically get some supplies. So when they meet Joseph again, which we just read this account, Joseph recognized them immediately, but they did not recognize Joseph. So in that alone, this is indicating that Joseph must have looked just like the Egyptians. He must have had the same complexion as the Egyptians, or at least look similar. All right, so anyway, reading on. Acts 21 and 38. This is dealing with the Apostle Paul. All right, it says, art not thou that Egyptian? So once again, they have mistaken Paul to be an Egyptian, which before these days made us an uproar and led us out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers. But Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, all right, a city in Sicilia, a citizen of no mean city, and I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people. So once again, Paul said, I am not an Egyptian, but I am a Jew. So why would they think that Paul was an Egyptian? Because he looked like one. He had the same complexion. All right, and then you have another lie, another narrative that the Egyptians were not so-called black. That's a lie. We're gonna prove that in a minute. And I know this has nothing to do with Cowboys, but before I went into the Cowboy history, I had to break down Ezekiel, telling us that we lost our majesty and it was given to the hands of other people, to make them seem as if they were kings for this long and blah blah blah, and that's not the case, man. All right. So let's get this again, man. So we're just getting precepts to prove that you're Israel. All right, pay attention. Acts 13 and 1. Now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simon, that was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch and Saul. All right, so they call Simon Niger. All right, which another word you could say is they called him a nigger. All right. Now let's look at the according to the Bible, the Eastern Bible Dictionary of Niger. All right, it says black, a surname of Simon. He was probably so called from his dark complexion. Once again, yes. Yes, he was so-called black, all right? You know. All right, now remember this word. They call him a Niger, all right? So let's get here. Look at this. This is a brother. This brother that a lot of you probably don't even know about. You should look him up. His name is Kenneth Niger. All right, he was the first black king of Scotland. All right, around 928 A.D. All right, he died in 967 A.D. All right, which this is a lie in itself that he was the first black king of Scotland, because there were many black kings of Scotland. I'll cover that in another video. But yes, we did rule over Europe in the medieval ages. All right, I'll cover that in a separate video. Once again, that goes back into your majesty. It was taken from you and given, to the others. To that's why to this day what you have people, Israelis, they say that they're you. All right, it's just no different than in Europe. They say that you're you, and also you have so-called white men in South Africa telling you they're South African, and in America they tell you that they're American, and they are none of these things. But that goes back to, yes, they took over the majesty. Now they make themselves to be important, which goes back to the word majesty. Elevation, honor, excellence. Great. Now they're viewed as great and all this other stuff. But originally it was us, and our history was stolen from us to fulfill prophecy. All right. So now that we know that the Egyptians, or now that we know that the Jews were actually black, man, and also you can look up a video that Floyd Mayweather did, and he himself also was at a press conference, I believe, and he said yes, the Jews were black. He was correct. Of course, Floyd Mayweather is, he's wicked as well, but that's a separate video for this day. I just wanted to point that out. But now we know that the Egyptians were so-called black. Or now, I ain't gonna say that. Now we know that the Israelites were so-called black, so-called people of color. So now let's deal with the Egyptians. All right. Well, you see these movies they make, like Gods of Egypt. You have Caucasians playing throughout all the movies. They playing all these figures. You have the god Horus, the false god Horus, who was played by an Edomite or a Caucasian, and all of that. All right, now let's deal with that. Let's prove that the Egyptians were also black. This is kind of easy. I don't even know why this is a thing, but anyway, moving on. All right, the sons of Ham, Cush, and Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, Canaan. Sons of Ham. All right, there you go. You read about that in First Chronicles, 1 and 8. But anyway, let's look at what Google says. It says, what race were Cushites? It says, to people in the ancient Middle East, Ethiopia was seen as a symbol of the darker-skinned people who inhabited the rest of the African continent. By this line of reasoning, some Jewish rabbinical literature uses Cushite to mean black African people. All right, So one would then ask the question, why are they depicted as this? It's complete madness. All right, but anyway, and then even as it described that, look, they got Ham right here. They got Ham as a shaggy, Chewbacca looking, Caucasian. But we all know that Ham is the father of the so-called Africans. All right. Now, anyway, let's get Psalm 78:51. All right. It says, and smote all the firstborn in Egypt, the chief of their strength, in the tabernacles of Ham. So once again, the chief Hamites was the Egyptians who were so-called black. All right. That today, if you want to read conventional history, today they would be known as the Nilotic peoples, the Maasai, the Dinka, the Nuer. Those are the real Egyptians. All right. They still do a lot of the practice that the ancient Egyptians did back in the day. All right. But anyway, and it's the same way you see as it says, Cush was the father of Nimrod. We just learned, it just told you that Cush was an African. All right. Yet when they show you a picture of Nimrod, he's Caucasian. So the lies run deep, brothers. And I know I'm way off topic about the Cowboys. I'm going to get to that. You can skip ahead if you want. But I'm proving that you're Israel, all right? So after we proved all that, look, you have movies like Noah. They have movies like Exodus, where they have the Caucasians, man. And they're Moses. So once again, and we're gonna show you images of the ancient Egyptians right after this. All right. So let's get to it. All right, you see this? This is 3 female musicians from the tomb of Nat. All right, 1450 BC. All right, see, look, as you see, these are Egyptians, ancient Egyptians. And as you can see, they are so-called black. You can see their hair. You can see the skin complexion. You can see these statues right here. It says ceramic tiles depicting 11 people from the temple of Ramses III. All right, this is in 1186 to 1155 BC, the 20th dynasty. You see once again, these are so-called black people. All right. And as you can see, these two right here, don't they look similar to what's written right here, or what's drawn here? All right, they look identical, really. Same hairstyle, because they're the same people. These are your real Egyptians. All right, so once again, so on that right there, we've proven that on one part of history, you've already been robbed and stolen. And that's not to say that the Egyptians and the Israelites are the same. They're not. All right. The scriptures tell you that the Lord made a distinction between Egyptian and Israel. All right. We're not the same. But the point is made that yes, the people you are of the people of the book. All right. So-called black men. All right. And that's when it goes into cultural appropriation. All right. Cultural appropriation is the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of an element or elements of one culture or identity by members of another culture or identity. This can be controversial when members of a dominant culture appropriate from minority cultures. All right, and this shows you that a lot of our people are on a low level, because when they think of cultural appropriation, they think of some white woman with damn cornrows or dreadlocks, not understanding that the fact that someone would call themselves a Jew, or that someone would call themselves what's that, another word? Someone would call themselves European. That in itself is cultural appropriation. Because they don't originate from that land. When someone would call themselves South African, American, even though these lands weren't called that, according to the Bible, the point is, these people, there are certain people on this planet that have stolen an entire identity, and wear it as if it was their very own, That's real cultural appropriation. Real cultural appropriation is the fact that your whole entire history has been stolen. All right? And made you believe that you come from nothing. But in reality, it's reversed. In reality, you ruled for far longer than you are aware, or most of you are aware. Some of you brothers already know. Anyway, let's get to the actual video. All right, we're finally here. Damn. Once again, the real Cowboys hidden history. All right, so let's get it. First, we got to look at the etymology of the word cowboy. All right, it says a man employed to have care of grazing cattle on the Great Plains for a stockman or ranch, doing his work on horseback. All right, so it's an employed person that did the work on a ranch. That's basically what a cowboy is. All right, so let's keep going. All right, so now let's look at the word boy. Where we at? Oh, look at this. In Ireland, in the far west of the United States, meaning male Negro slave. So boy was also synonymous with male Negro slave, or Asian personal servant of any age. All right, so now watch here. The takeaway. It says, Take, for example, the word boy when being used to refer to a small child. Most of us don't think twice. But when the word boy refers to an adult black man and the speaker is a white supervisor who just passed him up a promotion, it takes on a much different meaning. All right? The word boy could be racist, as this is all saying. So cowboy, once again, the reason they called them boy, it was a slur to the so-called black man. All right. So hence, when you look at a lot of cowboys in history, they were so-called black. But we're gonna get that in the article anyway, very soon. All right. So here we go. This is more on the word boy. For those who think that African Americans are too sensitive over the issue, and it is just well-meaning person making a mistake, I understand that. But others most understand the history of African Americans and what it has always meant to black men for someone to call them a boy. One, it's the ultimate sign of disrespect and is often more offensive than calling them the N-word. For years, black men were summarily dismissed and treated with disregard. It was as if their stature was diminished when someone white called them a boy. I've heard black men describe the hurt and pain growing up and having someone white call them a boy in front of their own child. All right, so we're not dealing with the emotional side. The point is, historically, boy was a slur that was called to black man, and hence the word cowboy, which was someone that had to work the fields of the land at a ranch, for someone who owned said ranch. And on top of that, there's not an interview. It's an interview. There's a video that you brothers can watch. It's a so-called black man. It's an old so-called black man, and he's actually going into detail about him being a cowboy and that it was a slur, which it is. Which is funny because, like I said, nowadays when you think of a cowboy, you think of a Caucasian. You think of country music. All right. Anyway, moving on. Now here we get to. Let's get to this article. This is the majority of what my point. All right. The lesser known history of African American cowboys. 1 in 4 cowboys was black. So why aren't they more present in popular culture? All right, first and foremost, I don't even believe that 1 in 4. I believe it was more than that, But, let's just stick with that for the article. All right, let's keep going. And this article is from what is known as the Smithsonian. As you people know, the Smithsonian is known for archaeology, even though most of the shit that they have in the Smithsonian are what you call replicas. They have the real paintings and stuff hidden, but that's for another day. All right, so let's look up the word narrative. Narrative is a tale, a story, a connected account of the particulars of an event or series of incidents. See, a tale, one person's story. So you look at the word history, it just means his story. All right, now look at this: a faction, fictional narrative based on real characters or events. A blend of fact and fiction. And that's what a lot of history is. You have people that really existed, but they're depicted a certain way that's not the case. All right. So it's all about narrative in the conventional history. It's all about factions. All right, but anyway. Let's look at the Smithsonian. All right. An African American cowboy sits on the saddle. That was the brother we seen a while ago. All right, now let's look at this man, this brother. All right, let's get it. This is in his 1907 autobiography, Cowboy. Nat Love recounts stories from his life on the frontier so cliche. They read like scenes from a John Wayne film. He describes Dodge City, Kansas, a town smattered with the romanticized institutions of the frontier. A great many saloons, dance halls, and gambling houses, and very little of anything else. He moved massive herds of cattle from one grazing area to another, drank with Billy the Kid, we'll get to him in a minute, and participated in shootouts with native peoples, depending their land on the trails. And when not, as he put in, engaged in fighting Indians, He amused himself with activities like daredevil, riding, shooting, roping, and such sports. All right, so this brother's name is Nat Love, and this is his account of what was going on in 1907. All right, now reason, and it's fun. It's funny too, because this hairstyle that this brother has is what's known nowadays as freeform locks, and I actually had this hairstyle, a couple years ago. So it's just funny that there's nothing new under the sun. This hairstyle been around. All right, so let's move on. We'll get to Billy the Kid in a minute. You see, oftentimes, my grandfather, he used to tell me that Billy the Kid was probably so-called black, and he could have been correct. All right. Now, as we know, conventional history, this is what Billy the Kid looked like. But a lot of times, what people like to do is put a little bit of the truth through cinema. All right, you got Billy the Kid, but now you have, what's this show called? It's this show I watched it a while back. It's called Cannon Busters. In Cannon Busters, you have this man named Philly the Kid, and as you can see, he's so-called black, And a lot of times these people, because, they're tricksters, they put the truth in films. All right, so it wouldn't shock me if Billy the Kid was so-called black. Now, I don't know that, but it wouldn't shock me. All right, this happens again in movies and shows and movies like Spartacus and Thor. You had Idris Elba, who played the black gatekeeper in Thor. You had this brother, Peter Mensa. He played the black teacher, and you notice both of these people play the role of the teacher, to the so-called white man in the films, But in reality, this is another video for another day. But in reality, it was more than them that was black in that region. The majority of them were black in that region. We'll get to that. I'll make videos for both of these another day on the Vikings and on Spartacus. All right. But once again, like I said, just on Philly the Kid, these two, they always have that so-called black man, usually a man in the film, that seems out of place, and you would wonder why he is there, But they're alluding to the real origins of the characters. But anyway, moving back onto this article in the Smithsonian. Back with Nat Love. Though Love's tale from the frontier seems typical for a 19th century cowboy, they come from a source rarely associated with the Wild West. Love was African American, born into slavery near Nashville, Tennessee. Few images embody the spirit of American West, as well as the trailblazing sharpshooting horseback riding cowboy of American lore. And though African American cowboys don't play a part in the popular narrative, historians estimate that 1 in 4 cowboys were black. So once again, when you think of a cowboy, you think of a Caucasian, and yet you don't think of these brothers. But brothers, we were we were a lot of your famous outlaws and a lot of your famous gunmen. All right, it's just funny, man. Let's keep reading this article. All right, so the cowboy lifestyle came into its own in Texas, which had been cattle country since it was colonized by Spain in the 1500s. But cattle farming did not become the bountiful economic and cultural phenomenon recognized today until the late 1800s, when millions of cattle grazed in Texas. All right, I ain't gonna read you brothers can pause and read this on your own. But the point is telling you when cowboys came into style. All right, but also, we were already here in the 1500s. Also, don't believe and buy the narrative that 1619 is when we got here to please. All right, the original so-called people of America were so-called black. You can read to prove that. You can read what's his brother? What's that man name? Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin wrote a paper titled, you brothers should look this up. He wrote a paper titled Observations of Mankind, in which he stated that the Europeans were so-called black, as well as the indigenous Native Americans, so-called. The indigenous Americans. All right. Anyway, reading on. And just on this alone, you can look up these famous people: Bass Reeves, Nat Love, Bill Pickett, John Ware. You can look up a lot of black cowboys, but understand that there was more than that. All right. All right, Smithsonian, but with combination of lack of effective containment, barbed wire was not yet invented, and to few cow hands, the cattle population ran wild. Ranchers returning from the war discovered that their herds were lost or out of control. They tried to round up the cattle and rebuild their herds with slave labor, but eventually the Emancipation Proclamation left them without the free workers on which they were so dependent. Desperate for help rounding up maverick cattle, ranchers were compelled to hire now free skilled African Americans as paid cowhands. Right after the Civil War, being a cowboy was one of the few jobs open to men of color who wanted to not serve as elevator operators or delivery boys or other similar occupations. All right. Now the thing about this is you got to understand something as well. Every so-called black man in America was not a slave at this time. All right, you had many free blacks, many so-called free blacks. All right, once again, that's a narrative. The narrative is that all these cowboys that came along were all slaves. That's narrative. All right, but let's keep going. All right, remember it said free. Hire now free skilled African Americans as paid cowhands. Let's get this. All right. It says free blacks skilled in herding cattle found themselves in even greater demand when the ranchers began selling their livestock in northern states, where beef was nearly 10 times more valuable than it was in cattle in inundated Texas. The lack of significant railroads in the state meant that enormous herds of cattle needed to be physically moved to shipping points in Kansas, Colorado, and Missouri. Rounding up herds on horseback, cowboys traversed unforgiving trails fraught with harsh environmental conditions and attacks from Native Americans defending their lands. African American cowboys faced discrimination in the towns they passed through. They were barred from eating at certain restaurants or staying in certain hotels, for example, but within their crews they found respect and a level of equality unknown to other African Americans of the era. All right, once again, like I said, all these cowboys, they didn't come from slavery, all right? But anyway, let's look at the word free Negro, since it said free blacks. All right, free Negro. It says in the British colonies in North America and in the United States before the abolition of slavery in 1865, free Negro or free black described the legal status of African Americans who were not enslaved. The term was applied both to formerly enslaved people and to those who had been born free. All right, so once again, all you don't come from slavery, man. Hell no. But the ones that were free, the so-called free blacks, they still were under discrimination for sure. But the point is, you didn't all come from slavery backgrounds. All your ancestors didn't come from slavery backgrounds. Technically they did if you want to go all the way back into Egypt in that time. I'm talking about for the 1800s. All right, so here we go. So Nat Love recalled the camaraderie of cowboys with admiration. A braver, truer set of men never lived than these wild sons of the plains, whose home was in the saddle and their couch Mother Earth, with the sky for a covering, he wrote. They were always ready to share their blanket and their last ration with the less fortunate fellow companion, and always assisted each other in many trying situations that were continually coming up in a cowboy's life. All right, as you can see, once again, all these brothers were what you would call a cowboy, man. Your history doesn't start. Your history doesn't start at with Abraham Lincoln, man. Anyway, the cattle drives ended up by turn of the century. Railroads became a more prominent mode of transportation in the West. Barbed wire was invented, and Native Americans were regulated to reservations, or relegated to reservations, all of which were decreased the need for cowboys on ranches. This left many cowboys, particularly African Americans, who could not easily purchase land in a time of rough transition. So this part right here, that's why this history is often lost, because cowboys grew out of style, grew out of demand. So they went into the city, what you would call the inner cities. A lot of us went into the inner city, and that's what you get where we're at today. That's why a lot of our people, they don't know about farming. Of course, you have exceptions to the rule. Myself included. I am a farmer. I know many black farmers, but a lot of us went where, to the inner cities. And who took on the role of the cowboys? The Caucasian. All right, that's why to this day you have them always mention that they're a damn cowboy. What's that terrible musician? What's his name? Damn, Kid Rock. He had that song, "I'm a Cowboy." White trash Kid Rock. Now cowboy is associated with the Caucasian. Uh, Here we go. It says, Love fell victim to the changing cattle industry and left his life on the wild frontier to become a pullman porter for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. To us, wild cowboys of the range, used to the wild and unrestricted life of the boundless plains, the new order of things did not appeal, he recalled. Many of us became disgusted and quit the wildlife for the pursuits of our more civilized brother. See, once again, that Love is mentioning this is how they became. A lot of people moved into the inner city. All right. Bill Pickett, born in 1870 in Texas to former slaves, became one of the most famous early rodeo stars. He dropped out of school to become a ranch hand and gained an international reputation for his unique method of catching stray cows. Modeled after his observations of how ranch dogs caught wandering cattle, Pickett controlled a steer by biting the cow's lip, subduing him. He performed his trick called bulldogging or steer wrestling for audiences around the world with Miller Brothers 101 Wild Ranch Show. Alright, so it's kind of funny too, because he came up with this method by watching dogs, chase cattle. That's where you get the term bulldog. And to this day, many so-called black people, what dog do they have of choice? The pit bull. It's just kind of funny on that regard. But anyway, moving on. Although Hearn aims to train young cowboys and cowgirls to enter into the professional rodeo industry, his rodeo goals are twofold. The theme of Cowboy of Color is let us educate you while we entertain you, he explains. Let us tell you the wonderful things blacks, Hispanics, and Indians did for the settling of the West that history books have left out. Yes, once again, you see how he mentioned blacks, Hispanics, and Indians did for the settling of the West. Once again, as I say all the time, peace to the 12. Black, Hispanic, and Indian. A lot of people that go into these titles are actually Israelites. You have a lot of people. Sammy Sosa would tell you he's an Hispanic. But anyway, neither here nor there. We the descendants of the people of the book are all throughout the Western, are a lot of the people of color all throughout the Western Hemisphere, really throughout the world. But that's another video for another day. And as you can see, you have the so-called black man, the so-called Hispanic man, and the Native American, quote unquote. Now we got this picture of Bass Reeves. This is actually what made me even start this video in the first place. I was watching a brother, I believe his name was Malcolm, and he was talking about Bass Reeves and how, he was this black Lone Ranger. He was the real Lone Ranger, which is true. I already knew that, but him doing that inspired me to do that lesson. All right. So Bass Reeves, for those of you that don't know, was the Lone Ranger. All right. And, that's where you get that movie, The Lone Ranger, which once again, the movie and the TV show Lone Ranger is with who? A Caucasian. But let's see this. It says, was Bass Reeves the real Lone Ranger? All right. History may have been obscured, and the actual Lone Ranger seems to have been inspired by an African American named Bass Reeves. He eventually became a deputy U.S. Marshal, was a master of disguise, an expert marksman, had a Native American companion, and rode a silver horse. All right, so once again, the first black deputy U.S. Marshal of west of the Mississippi River. He worked mostly in Arkansas and Oklahoma. I encourage you brothers to look this man up on your own to see more what he did. But as it says, he was the real Lone Ranger. Now let's look at what it means by that. This is the Lone Ranger of cinema. You know, a Caucasian man. Once again, a Caucasian man, the old version and the new version. And you have Johnny Depp playing a Native American. So on both fronts, you have so-called Caucasians playing this. But in reality, this is what the two look like. Bass Reeves and his Native American companion. This is what they would have looked like. You know, so it just shows you once again how they make themselves to be as if they were you. You know, so that's what real cultural appropriation is, man. That's what real cultural appropriation is. You know, but anyway. Now someone would ask, well, why does all this happen? You know, well, let's go into the Bible and then we're going to close out. All right. So let's just read this whole account. This is Genesis chapter 27 and the 28th verse down to 42. Let's get it. All right, this is Jacob's father, Isaac, giving him this blessing. All right, it says, therefore God give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be everyone that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. So once again, this is dealing with the rulership that was given to Jacob, you know, who was a so-called black man. Rulership was given to him, and all the other nations bowed down to him, you know. And that was the time back then, and that's coming back, you know, very soon. And it came to pass as soon as Isaac had made an end of blessing Jacob, and Jacob was yet scarce going out from the presence of Isaac his father, Esau came in from his hunting. You know, and then you read, you know, and this when Esau finds out what happened. You know. In verse 34, and when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry and said unto his father, bless me even also, O my father. All right, now this is where we're going into what the blessing of Esau, who is the so-called white man. All right. And he says, thy brother came with subtlety, and hath taken away thy blessing. And he said, is not he rightly named Jacob? For he hath supplanted me these 2 times. What does he mean by that? Jacob means to supplant, meaning to, you know, finesse. These 2 times. He took away my birthright, and behold, now he hath taken away my blessing. And he said, hast thou not reserved a blessing for me? Now let's get the blessing of Esau. All right. And Isaac his father, this is the 39th verse, and Isaac his father answered him and said, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. And by the sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. All right, so a time would come where Esau would break the chain of command, you know, and begin to rule over Jacob. You know, but Jacob had been ruling over Esau for that long. All right, and Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. And these words of Esau, her oldest son, were told to Rebekah. And she sent and called Jacob her younger son, and said unto him, behold, thy brother Esau is touching thee, doth comfort himself, purposing to kill thee. So what we learn, Esau was angry and wanted to kill Jacob. But we also learn that Esau was given the ability to one day throw off the shackles, and rule the world, which he did do. You know, he's doing that now. You know, in the form of America. But anyway, really in the form of Western civilization in general. Really the whole world. Anyway, let's read the account of Jacob getting the right to Esau's blessing in the first place. Genesis chapter 25, verse 29. All right. And Jacob sought pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, Feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. And Jacob said, Sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau said, Behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me? And Jacob said, Swear to me this day. And he swore unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So right there, Esau gave his birthright to Jacob. So the point of this is what? At the time of Isaac's blessing, Esau went to Isaac as if he was just going to get the blessing that he had already gave to Jacob. He didn't say, oh, wait, Father, I gave my blessing to Jacob. So he wanted to lie. All right. He wanted to lie to him. All right. And he also wanted to murder Jacob in the end. So I'm going somewhere with this. So when you go to John 8:42, I'll just read the whole thing. Yahushua said unto them, for those of you that don't know, Jesus' real name is Yahushua in ancient Hebrew, said unto them, If God were your Father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from the Most High. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do ye not understand my speech? Even because ye cannot hear my word. Now watch this. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. So what does that pertain to? That's pertaining to Esau. By the way, the word devil means deceiver. And this is pertaining to Esau. Why? Because he wanted to murder Jacob. And what does it say? He was a murderer from the beginning. See, a lot of people think that's Cain. No, it's talking about Esau. How was he a murderer from the beginning? Because all that took place in the book of Genesis. The word Genesis means the beginning. All right, so in the beginning, he wanted to murder Jacob. You know, in Genesis, he wanted to murder Jacob. Why? Because of the birthright issue. And he abode not in the truth. We all know the truth is the scriptures. All right, but he abode not in the truth. What did he mean? He gave away his birthright. You know, because there's no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. And because I tell you the truth, you believe me not. So a lot of people that watch this video, they're going to be upset. Just like when I do videos on the blacks of Europe and etc., it's going to be hard to believe for some. But, you know, that's because they have bought in and believe into the deceiver, the devil. All right, they believe everything that is told to them by the Edomites. Anyway, Revelations 21:3. This is dealing with the Middle Ages, which I'm definitely going to do a video or maybe multiple videos on. All right, it says, and I saw an angel come down from heaven. This is Revelation 20:1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit. You know, you look up the definition of a pit, it's like a dark place, a cave, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. All right, we ruled over them for 1,000 years. All right. Because, you know, despite popular opinion, the so-called white man has only been in rulership for about 500 years. All right. But anyway, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. And Satan means adversary. For those of you who that don't know, there is a spiritual demon, Satan, but the word Satan can also just mean adversary. All right. So the adversary shall be loosed out of his prison, and he shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And who has deceived the entire world? The so-called white man. And most people take on their philosophies and their doctrines. All right, and um, just to prove that this who this is speaking of, what it say? Verse 2. He laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. Now watch this. Where did Vatican get his name? The word Vatican literally means divining serpent. See that? Old serpent. The literally means divining serpent and is derived from vatis, diviner, and con, serpent. Vatican city and St. Peter's Basilica, where, all right, so look, devil, a slanderer, the arch enemy of man's spiritual interests. Who is the enemy of man's spiritual interests? Who is trying to take out all spiritual aspects within life? It isn't the Arab. It isn't the Chinese man is marveling himself after the Edomites. Another story for another day. But it isn't the Africans. They still have spiritual beliefs. Who gives you evolution? The Big Bang. Who tells you that there is no God? Who tell you all that stuff? Who took out religion in the school system? Or who took out the Bible out of the school system? We all know the answer. All right, so it goes to Hebrews 12:16. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person, as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright, which we got that account. And what does profane mean? Secular. All right, we're devoted to that which is not sacred or biblical. Secular rather than religious. All right, not respectful of orthodox religious practice. Irreverent. All right. So once again, that's Esau. And Esau is still secular. To this day. That's why they try to tell you come from a monkey and that you came from the water. They try to tell you that the Most High didn't create you, man. And as you can see, once again, as you had this evolution lie, look at that. That's the Big Bang. Non-religious. They always tell you separation of church and state. You got the Vatican, full of Edomites, full of red men. All right, which once again we just read, Vatican means house of serpents. So when the scriptures talk about that old serpent, this is he. All right, but that's pretty much it on the video. This was kind of all over the place, even though the video was about Cowboys, but it's all through the spirit. Anyway, once again I say peace to the 12. Shalom.